we interrupt this program to bring you
a rather pleasant conversation about suicide. Yeah, I'm sure you weren't expecting that. So, essentially, the birth of this video is a little peculiar. Originally, I found the individual I was talking to on a not so erudite Destiny stream, where they were actually discussing having women in debate spaces. And it's funny because I actually wanted to make a video about that, and I probably still will, actually, because I do think it's an interesting conversation. But I saw the lady make a comment about suicide, and originally I asked, what are your victory conditions? Essentially, I was asking, what would convince you out of your belief here that suicide is a reasonable option that people should be allowed to take? And so I asked if she would have a conversation. And originally, she wanted to do a live stream, but I think when I finally made contact with her late at night, so I said, well, we could record it. I'll make it something like a podcast, and I'll upload it. She was all right with that. And so essentially, that's what this is. So I played around with the audio a little bit for the main conversation from my side. Not really so much her side, because her side was recorded pretty well, but my side wasn't. I had to use Audacity, and then I had to synchronize the audio together. So it might sound a wee bit wonky. I really hope it doesn't in post-production, or at least if it is wonky, it's still enough for you guys to kind of sit there and listen. Basically, there's really no video here. I just have the title screencast cards I've had over the years just strewn about, and then just fades in between each other, just because that way it's just not a black screen. But you don't really need to watch the video here. This is more something to sit down and listen to. And so again, it's also not really a debate. It kind of plays a little bit more like a therapy session, I'm going to be honest with you. But it was important for me to understand her point of view first, and understand like her upbringing, and understand where she's coming from. Because, which I will say later, I don't think there's much conversation to be had about the legislative policies of suicide, if you want me to be honest with you. And if you were to ask me why, I'll answer very simply. It really doesn't matter if it's legislated or not. If you do it correctly, the only person that can hold you to task is God. So I don't know. Which, again, we get into it briefly, like towards the end. But it's not really a debate. And I am glad she talked to me. I am extremely glad. So enough of this introduction. I shall allow you all to listen. And there we go. So, I guess we're here to talk about... What are we here to talk about? You tell me.
Yeah, like suicide-related stuff, and like it can be, whether it be like personal, and also like the ethics and the rationality of it, and it can be like also tied into law, and also how religious taboos have a lot of influence on them. I think that's important too.
Mm-hmm. So you're up.
But yeah, so
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, what were you gonna say?
Well, I was gonna say you're obviously not a religious person.
I was very religious, and especially when I was a lot younger, I was very religious. But then certain problems within like Catholicism, I was very passionate about it. How I got into religion has kind of like darker elements, I guess probably people would think, because it came from me when I was like 3, inquiring about what happens when you die, because I like secretly was thinking, well, maybe that would
3?
be a lot.
Like 3 years old?
Yeah. Like I thought maybe that would be a lot better. Because at first, well, I think I started pondering death and being a bit afraid, because I could tell that like there's a lot of fear of death. I didn't really know I didn't know anyone who died. But, like, I saw it in like movies, and I knew it was kind of, I think that's where I knew it was like feared. So I thought maybe it was really scary. But I was thinking, oh well, I don't really know it, so how can I be scared? And there's like a lot of scarier things in life that I do know, and maybe death would be actually a good thing. So I was inquiring about it. And I also I felt like life was, even back then, I felt like just kind of like meaningless. Like, what am I even doing here? Kind of like, I don't want to be here. I never asked to be here. And I don't know, probably in different words, in my vocabulary is like, I know a lot more limited, so I don't know what I thought exactly. But yeah, stuff like that.
Like all this at the age of 3 to 6, you're pontificating. these heavy philosophical topics?
Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, yeah.
Interesting. That's really interesting. So, like, you wouldn't say that you've had a real traumatic or rough go of things, would you?
Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I would say different. Yeah, specifically different between different ways I was, and I think like my family dynamics. Yeah, no, definitely. So, yeah, pretty significant trauma in many ways, and the trauma affected me negatively, which make more like yeah, so different stuff. Like I think that's I yeah, it's hard to remember. I think too, that was part of it. I think even back then, like it ramped up, but my yeah, I just remember
Mm-hmm.
yeah, being pretty sensitive and like
Mm-hmm.
also like I yeah, so like I would get my thing was always like for when I get mad, I'm kind of more of yelling person and some yeah, my parents can be a lot more like yelling, but they can also be a lot more especially well back then when I was younger, they can get physically aggressive and stuff. So that was that I think that was part of why I was in different stuff. Like I had like um different stuff like ticks and echolalia that like I didn't know what it was at the time, and I think feeling like out of control in that way kind of contributed to me wanting to die. Plus, like the physical aggression and then different. And I was just like always very like I always remember being very fearful of things.
But not death, though.
No, surprising. No, I mean, and I remember, and I knew that was I knew I could tell back then that other like I knew that was considered abnormal, and I knew I had some differences that I could tell and different thoughts of people weren't very favorable often to people who think differently, especially if they felt very strongly about it. So I didn't think people would respond very well to
Mm-hmm.
wanting to die, and I didn't know if anyone wanted to until like middle school. I realized that other people really, I think, wanted to die too at times, but I didn't know if I was the only one. So it's kind of like always nervous and on the edge of what if people found out what would they think
Mm-hmm.
and like
So,
how would they react.
yeah. So the thing that's always been very interesting to me, and I think this is a wee bit peculiar, um, is the amount of concern given to other people's thoughts when if the ultimate goal is indeed to kill yourself, what difference does any of all of this make? Right? Like if you're about to, end your tenure in this mortal coil, why do you care if people in middle school feel bad about you? Like what difference does it
Yeah,
make?
well, this was even before middle school because middle school
Mhm.
is when I felt a little bit better about it because I felt
Mhm.
like oh I'm not the only one who feels this way.
Mhm. But
But it
mhm.
was also too like I was in like no I mean I think when you're younger you can get a lot of especially you can get a lot of backlash for thinking differently and I knew I thought
Mhm.
differently and just like yeah I mean I remember like being in school when like we would learn about something in health class like about eating right or not smoking and wanting to live was just a given. So I felt
Mhm.
like yeah, I knew I was like it was just expected, so I felt very
Mhm.
alienated and stuff and like I was kind of picky anyway, so
Mhm.
I was like, well, I'll just eat unhealthy foods. But now I can appreciate maybe for nutrition, like you can feel better in the moment, even day to day, even if you're not interested in longevity. But for like smoking, I was like, well, I'm gonna smoke when I'm older because that's a good deal for me. I get to, I guess, have the benefits that people keep smoking, but also too, I'll just probably gonna end my life early, so I won't have to deal with that. But also too, some religious fears around like hell. Like when I first heard about asked about like what happens when you die, I was thinking, oh, I hope it's something better because I just I hoped it was something more than this world because I like didn't really want to be there, but also then I heard about heaven and like my mom says she doesn't remember this, but she was like because I was like, oh, where do you go when you die? Because like I'm kind of afraid of that or something like that. But then she was like, oh, well, you go to heaven, and I was like, well, what's heaven? She's like, well, it's whatever you want it to be. And I was like, oh, well, I want to go there. It's like, well, of course you do. And I was like, no, I want to go there right now. And she looked kind of like really freaked out, but I was like thinking, why? Because who wouldn't want to go? Who would want to stick around here basically when you could go to this place if that's whatever you want it to be? But
Yeah.
yeah,
How
and
old
then
were
I
you
learned at one
when
point.
when that happened?
What's that?
How old were you when that happened?
I think like 3.
So you're still like so you're this robust at 3?
I mean, I can't speak about like. I think that's a lot. Those are along the lines,
That's
and
crazy.
like, but I mean, I could get some like specific words wrong. I mean, my vocabulary is obviously going to be better, but I don't know. I
So
I don't know what I thought.
no, I think so. So the thing that's interesting to me is we've got someone that's clearly really thoughtful, really intelligent at a young age, and we've made it this far, right? You say you're about 29, right? Turning 30. What's
Yeah.
kept you here this whole time then? What's
Well, I've been to intensive care uh 3 times, and yeah, and one of the times I went to 2 ICUs the first attempt, and that was like the best hospital. It was like apparently like the best hospital in the country. But then they sent me to another one. I don't know if they sent me to another one just because they didn't want it on their records and they thought I was going to make it. But I mean, the other hospital, I think, put me in like a medically induced coma. I had a breathing tube.
so they resuscitated you basically is what you're saying.
I don't think it was technically resuscitation,
Not
but I think it was
technically,
like
fine.
putting. I think I was. They were worried about my brain swelling. Maybe that was in like late stage poisoning because I said I was being evasive when my parents were asking about it. And then so I had a breathing tube when I woke up. And then another time, the time after that, I was like, well, it almost worked with the poison. So I tried the poison again. Only this, I was I was found again, and I got dialysis. I think I was found a bit earlier, even though I took more poison. But I think I stumbled into like the bathroom, like in a blackout state because I like felt sick from it. So I think he said he found me there, I guess slumped over, almost unconscious with like my eyes rolling in the back of my head. And another time I was at I took a bunch of like pills they gave me at a treatment center that I went to after a psych ward, and that fell through, but I was out of there, and I was in CCU, so I've been in intensive care from 3 attempts. I've gotten really sick from other like OTC pills a few times, and I've tried different, but yeah, so I didn't go to the hospital or anything, but I got really like sick for like over 24 hours from that. I've tried like yeah, so either some of the methods I've gotten like somewhat injured or sick from them too, and not gone in, but yeah. And then the ones I get times I've been come the closest really. I've been taken to intensive care a few times. So
Okay. Okay, I
and
get you.
I think part of it maybe too like yeah, I've tried hanging before, but I like between not doing it a certain way and also just reflexes, I kind of reflexively kind of grab on even like almost instantaneously. But also like really afraid of pain. I think that might be factoring. That's why the poison I took was probably painful on some level. It was really painful when I woke up in ICU, but it was also like really sedating in a way. So I don't remember it being too much painful before I woke up.
So, I got a question. So, what does your social circle look like?
Um, yeah, I have trouble with friendships, I think, because I was made to feel like, well, part of it, yeah, I think just with the guilt, I feel guilty of wanting to die. And I think part of that is how I was talked to about it, particularly with my mom kind of induced a lot of guilt in me. And some of the stuff she says I can kind of bounces off, but I feel like there is some truth to it. Like suicide does really impact people negatively. So I can connect with people sometimes, like pretty easily, but also like I feel guilty though. I like getting close to them in a way. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'd say that's the biggest thing of
So,
it.
so do you have friends and people you talk to? Because the only person you've mentioned is your mom so far.
I mostly try to avoid like everybody, honestly.
So you don't have
And
very
like
many.
no,
Mm-hmm.
online I'll talk to people, but I try to do it in a more impersonal way because I just feel so guilty doing
Mm-hmm.
it on a more personal level, and even sometimes people online, because I do feel like I don't know I naturally feel like I connect with a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
just in some ways. I know whether it be like online or in person, but
Mm-hmm.
because
Go ahead.
it's interesting. The psych ward gave me these tests that like they they gave me a bunch of questionnaires, these people that didn't know me,
Mm-hmm.
but they ended up kind of dismissing most of the results and just giving me a diagnosis that clearly wasn't indicated. I think they were just going through the motions with the test. But they had a blurb of like the only traits that I came up as positive, and one of them was yeah, so one of them was how I don't trust people. And they
Mm-hmm.
said, and that was actually the little blurb they made got with that was pretty accurate, but they just added a bunch of filler. I think they just wanted to give me the most convenient diagnosis. I think that's a common pattern for me with like different like schools at home, just like
But no
the way I
therapy.
am
You
is
have
being
your.
inconvenient.
Mm-hmm. And so have you been to therapy and talked to a therapist about this?
Um, I haven't had best of luck with that because like so I do have trust issues, and the thing with mental health professionals is a lot of the times they have some of the most fragile egos. So like I don't know, like it started out I was already a cautious person. I was always a very curious person. So with mental health professionals, like I would ask questions or like kind of like and try to like they get they oftentimes will get their egos I think hurt by me inadvertently. And especially too I end up in these forced situations. So
Yeah. Hmm. I guess I kind of doubt the narrator a bit here. You say their egos are hurt by you of all people. What would you say to them to hurt their egos? Would you like directly like insult them? Because you don't seem like an extremely confrontational person to begin with, just from our conversation thus far.
no, I so sometimes I would or even just questioning them, I think that would hurt their egos a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
And two, like a lot of the times mental health professionals like are some of ironically some of the kind of more tactless people out there, and like especially too they have a lot of control over me, so it's kind of a bad situation there. But a lot of them, especially psychiatrists, can be and like psych nurses and psych wards can be very more tactless than other people, and where other people I think kind of somewhat pick up on my vibe that,
What do you mean by
and this doesn't happen
calculus?
always, but I'm more of like kind of a fearful person, so they'll kind of be mindful of that, and they'll kind of more, and they'll also just be more tactful in general. They will come out kind of more. They can be very abrasive up front and kind of like insulting mental health professionals.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay.
Well, and they
So
also like to like give me quick assessments and stuff like in the blink of an eye, or like know think they know me from the notes, and then they get offended I think when I don't match their expectation. So I think it just complicates things for them. They just don't like it.
what did you mean by calculus?
Oh, sorry. What's that?
You said calculus. Like they're like a calculus person, or they're very like what do you mean by that?
I don't think I said that. Maybe I said something else.
Hmm.
Wait, callous? Did I say? I don't think I said
Okay.
that.
It
But
doesn't. Okay. You meant
I
callus.
definitely.
Okay. I think I got mispronounced. Okay. Got you. That makes sense. I was gonna guess you meant callus, or maybe I misheard you. Okay. So I can kind of see that. I can see that.
But I said they're tactless. They're tactless.
Tactless. There it is. Tactless. Okay, I thought it was cactulous. It was okay. Tactless. Got you. Got you.
Yeah, they're
Got you.
tactless a lot of times, and
Tactless.
like kind of, they're not very diplomatic or not very tactful a lot of the times. Kind of.
Mm-hmm. And so, as far as how you felt with your own life, you haven't really talked to very many, I guess, like friends or family members about this, right?
I mean, I do sometimes, like especially
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'll tell friends at it does like to like kind of warn them sometimes, but sometimes they'll say like oh like, but they'll sometimes say oh like they'll like oh but people might want to still be your friend because I'll kind of say like oh I shouldn't have friends because of this
Mm-hmm.
reason
But so
because
you
like
also
it's
so
like
you self isolate as well. Then you kind
oh
of.
no I mostly self isolate.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Where's your dad? You haven't mentioned him.
He's home. I had
Mm-hmm.
yeah it's like yeah so he was kind of like now he is a lot less I think less of a temper, and
Mm-hmm.
I think he's kind of a lot more sympathetic to me now because of the wanting to die. But no, at the time I feel like my parents often when I was younger when I would talk about it they'd kind of more dismiss me,
Mm-hmm.
and like so would experts kind of dismiss the fact I don't think they necessarily thought I actually wanted to die. But then by the time yeah so I think between yeah not like being afraid of pain or not necessarily knowing all the methods when I was younger
Mm-hmm.
or like how to effectively do it. But then by the time I got to an adult, that's when I first started to get into like getting sick from like
Mm-hmm.
OTC pills more, and like and that's when I at 19, so pretty much all my adulthood, 19 when I first drank the poison, I first ended up in intensive care, and then it that intensified the feelings.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any siblings?
Yeah, I'm one of five.
1 of 5. How do and what order are you actually?
The second oldest.
How do your siblings feel about their own lives? Do they share your opinions at all?
They I'm mostly the scapegoat. Um, I don't know. One of my siblings, I don't even know, like like kind of I mostly don't like. One of them has kind of acknowledged some of the stuff, but then kind of doesn't. But I feel like I was mostly the scapegoat of a lot of the things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, from early on, like when I don't know, when I was a baby, apparently my mom thought I wasn't right because I was too lethargic as an infant. I don't even know what that means. They actually got me tested at like 3 or 4, and I came up like surprisingly average. And even then, I think that's when I was having those thoughts of wanting to die. But I guess I came out as pretty average in the testing.
Mm-hmm.
And they said I was like, I guess, answered questions appropriately when when asked, but I didn't wasn't spontaneous in my speech. But I would talk to my parents about different things I was interested in, and then it said I was more spontaneous with my questions when they brought out the games. But I don't know, it's very gets
But
into
yeah,
very like
so
things. But
but not
they
that
came
stuff.
out as
But like
average.
your siblings, how do they feel? Like so so there's two different ways. How do they feel about you wanting to kill yourself versus how do they feel about their own lives? Have you had those conversations with them?
I a little bit. I mean, they like my brother from he said how yeah he was very scared. My sister said stuff like that. I mean, I don't know. We don't necessarily really talk about it
Mm-hmm.
often,
Mm-hmm.
but
Do you talk to them often, just generally at all? Do you have a good relationship with any of them?
um some of them like but yeah, it can be tough because I feel like it brings up trauma and I feel like it's not really like acknowledged how I was like the scapegoat and stuff, and I feel like I kind of am largely blamed for like a lot of stuff still.
So why do you say that you're blamed for a lot of stuff? What is that coming from?
Yeah, what stuff that was said to me directly from my parents, and less so now with my siblings, but more so like before in the past, and just the overall feelings like, yeah, and it was said to me like different stuff like that I was the problem in the family and stuff and everything like that.
Was
And
was
when my
any?
siblings
Go ahead.
would act up, they'd say, "Hey, I already have to deal with your sister, so don't you start acting this way." When I wasn't even like doing anything, they would do that. She would do that or something. Or my dad, yeah, my dad like at times, and then he would kind of, yeah, and he would get.
No, I
I feel
see.
like
Okay,
take
I see.
other.
I see what you're saying. Okay, I get you. So the reason why I asked a lot of these questions was to try to get a good understanding of like how other people would feel about you committing suicide or you dying, right? Like what is the interconnected web or your social circle, and how they would be affected and what are their thoughts? Because obviously for you to get to this point, I have to imagine you've had these conversations with these people before, but they haven't convinced you, right? So I'm kind of trying to figure out why haven't those bonds or relationships convinced you that life is an endeavor worth living for, worth living. And it would seem like you self isolated, right? So you don't have those strong bonds or connection with people. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, yeah, largely that, and just the fact I feel so. Yeah, I do feel fearful of people in general, but more so the isolating because of the guilt is what I was more. But yeah, no, I feel a lot of fear of being harmed, and I go to experts and stuff, and they don't. They have said that they don't. They kind of acted like they didn't believe me in the notes and stuff when I said, I fear people. I want to die, so I'm kind of protected from all harm from people. And
So so my question is, why aren't we addressing that fear of people before we defend the ethics of suicide?
I don't. I honestly. I know I'm outside of the norm in many ways, but I feel like it's more or less reasonable. Like I know a lot of it comes from trauma, but I still feel like it's still truthful. So I feel like it's reasonable. I know it's outside of the norm how much I fear people in general and suspiciousness and stuff, but
That might be the case, my friend, but to me it would feel like if suicide is the answer to avoiding your fear of people, right? Wouldn't courage in facing that fear be another solution before we get to you should die?
the reason is I feel like that would be like foolish and dangerous in a way because I feel like then it would make me kind of deluded to the dangers and make me more at risk.
No, I fundamentally disagree though. Like think of martial arts training, right? The nature of it is dangerous, but you get introduced into the skills in a safe environment first before you ever find yourself in a dangerous environment fighting someone. Wouldn't that
Yeah, I don't
exposure therapy with people be similar?
I mean, it's hard like yeah, I don't think so because it's not like I'm not like there are people like specifically like in psych wards that people work there, especially I'm more for which but I mean when I'm out, like I'm kind of afraid, or I'm afraid people will break into my house, or I'm afraid I like all this to have the door locked, and I always like to make sure when I go out of my house, out of like the apartment, even a second, lock the door right away. Come and lock it right away. I always get on my family like I don't like when they leave the door unlocked because it's like why leave it unlocked when you can just lock it? But I mean, I at the same time like I can be around pe- people in some ways. It's like and feel somewhat comfortable, but yeah, there's just like a general, like strong fear in general, like I'm going to be harmed by people again. And I have, in psych wards have been unkind to me and stuff, and like, just like, and two, part of the fear is going to the psych wards, and part of the fear is like getting like really kind of panicky and afraid of people. It just seems like the safest option a lot of the times.
Mm-hmm.
And I think,
Is the self isolation you're saying, and the ultimate self isolation would just be just to kill yourself then.
yeah, and like I said, the self isolation doesn't even come completely from like the not trusting people. Although maybe if I didn't isolate as much, because it would come up more. I feel like, but yeah, it's, and I think in suicide is said to be theorized to be an extreme fight or flight response. I know like Tazier is an animal that's like that actually bashes their like skulls in when they're highly stressed. So they kind of they look at that when they're thinking about the evolution of suicide and where it comes from.
Mm-hmm. Could you do you actually believe that suicide has any evolutionary advantage or any evolutionary roots? Because I honestly don't
Yeah,
think that it could, to be honest with you.
no, for sure. Yeah, I think so. I mean, why I think that's why it's here, because it has evolutionary roots. But I mean,
Well, first we'd have to understand the concept of evolution, right? Like
yeah, yeah.
how do you understand evolution? Let's match your understanding to mine first.
Okay. Like selective traits over time that's been beneficial, I guess.
So for the most part, so evolution, we would say by natural selection, is the idea that traits that help an organism survive and reproduce continue,
Yes.
right?
I believe that's part of it, but I think
Mm-hmm.
there's
But
stuff around like group dynamics
mm-hmm.
about suicide, and there's even stuff around like the protection from like really a lot of bodily harm or like stress that seems counterintuitive, but it's like just the last ditch effort to avoid kind of really type of
Mm-hmm.
highly distressing
But
situation.
but there'd still be a problem with that evolutionarily speaking, though, right? Like if we're talking about suicide, that's the lack thereof survival, not continuing it.
But yeah, I mean, I think,
So people who had a predisposition to suicide committed suicide and they didn't reproduce. How does that gene replicate?
well, I think some of them maybe it was recessive, and some of them had had kids before they committed suicide or stuff like that.
I guess that's
I
the
mean,
only way
there's
that could
also
have happened.
there's also like interesting stuff like around depression and psychosis where it's said that that can be actually a protective factor against suicide in some ways too. So it's
Depression?
I feel like you have interesting stuff that comes up around that seems counterintuitive, and some of it seems counter to each other. But I mean, I guess, yeah, where would you think suicide would come from? Because like you said, like it didn't evolve out of us. So I would think that there must be some benefit to it if why it's still here.
Yeah, I don't know the history of suicide and suicidal thoughts, but just from just my understanding of evolution, it doesn't seem like any organism would be able to thrive with that mindset. Just in the nature of trying to survive and reproduce. Like you wouldn't
Yeah,
like you can't propagate your genes at all because you don't want to get close to any person, let alone any
yeah.
male,
Well, I mean,
and you want to kill yourself. So if that be the case, if the genes that are making you suicidal exist, well, that's it. They're gone once you complete the task, so to speak.
yeah. Well, I think partly too is like is not everyone has my exact combination or my exact experience that I think brings it out. Because I mean, in some ways, I'm more I feel like can connect with people in a way, but I think some of it was learned like why I
Well, I
can
think it
like
has.
feel
Yeah,
agitated
if to cut you
about it.
off, I think it absolutely was learned, right? Because like when we go through a little bit of your history, what we see is just from go, since you were young, you've always had this predilection, and it was never challenged. And I don't really understand why your parents didn't challenge this. I don't understand why your siblings didn't challenge this. But you somehow were able to go through life without ever having this notion that your life matters challenged, or that you've never had a drive to live it. And no one ever said anything to you about this. I
Yeah,
think.
I think they didn't take that, but I was even talking about, I think
Mm-hmm.
my isolation was like largely learned. Like even as like before, like I told you I got deemed as average,
Mm-hmm.
but like in part of it, I think I ended up every diagnose like I get different diagnoses from everyone I see, but one of the people diagnosed me with autism, and that was they said, oh, that's probably, and they ended up a bunch of people said, oh, there's no way, but part of that I think was because like they were an expert in it, so kind of if you have a hammer, all you see is nails. Part of it was the testing. I have an uneven profile, I guess maybe like a bit
Yeah,
twice
but
exceptional or stuff like that, but also just because.
yeah, but let's bring it
But I
back a little
also had
bit.
become like,
Oh.
but I remember seeing them and
Mm-hmm.
like wondering, like I was already guarded by that, and I feel like that part might have been part of why I got the diagnosis. That's I'd already become more guarded by the time I was like 6, 7, from when I was like 3 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
And like I remember like thinking, I think at them like I'm gonna like keep a straight face, and I kind of learned to do that from my dad because he could be kind of a lot more, show a lot less emotions, and not all the time, but when I wanted to hide my emotions, I would kind of try to emulate that
Mm-hmm.
because like I was naturally a lot more expressive of myself, and I sometimes people reacted badly to it, so I kind of learned how to like become like poker face early on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think part of it when I went to the assessment, I might have some of that might have contributed to why I got the diagnosis, but
I
yeah,
mean, I
like
mean, I mean, regardless. I don't even just mean as far as the mental health physicians, but I'm talking about like your siblings, and more specifically your parents or your friends or anyone at any point in time. Like, why is it, no offense, I'm glad we're having this conversation, but why is it a guy from YouTube, having a conversation with you on Discord about like how your life probably matters to some extent? Where was all of this long before we got here to this point? Because honestly, based on what you've told me so far, I do get why you would feel the way you'd feel, right? If you don't have any strong connections to people, you don't have any desire, no will to life, you don't feel like any of this stuff matters. I can get how you could come to this conclusion. But I think the bigger problem that I'm kind of having is we got to this conclusion before we faced the fear of people. Because if suicide is the solution to your fear of people, then, buddy, I think we need to talk about that first before we jump to the extreme, don't you think?
yeah, I mean, I think like yeah, part when I was younger, I don't think they took it. I don't know. I don't. They say different stuff at different points in time because it's hard to remember all the things. But they said first they say, oh, we didn't. Kids say stuff or kids are curious about stuff, and then they say, oh, well, we did take you to professionals, but you didn't really say anything to them, which could have been true, very likely. I don't remember talking to professionals about it, but I remember I wouldn't have. I don't think I would have said anything. So I remember kind of being wary of them pretty early on because they seemed kind of like I felt like a bug under a microscope. So I didn't really know why they were trying to get into my head, and I just thought maybe the stuff would be used against me. So I was kind of like very wary of what they were trying to get at. I didn't know their angle, so I was kind of being a bit of evasive and cagey when I was around them.
Would you say your parents kind of did the bare minimum? Is that would that be a fair description? They're just kind of people who's like, well, we did what we could, and then
Yeah. Oh, sorry, my notifications. I don't know if I think it's making noise. But they, I think it's different stuff. So I think it was a lot of they didn't couldn't acknowledge what they were doing was harmful in different many ways, and even
mm-hmm.
even going into abuse. And I think the worse I kind of reacted to it, indifferent stuff, the worse they kind of had a tendency to a lot of times see like my actions as in a very uncharitable way, and that's kind of been the problem with a lot of people doing that to me,
Mm-hmm.
including like mental health professionals. But yeah, so like a lot of stuff. Yeah, so I think, I mean, in certain ways they did like, or like, yes, the sometimes it seems like they were doing stuff, but I think a lot of it, I think it not necessarily comes from a lot of harmful stuff. And some of the stuff they didn't do, really, I don't know. I guess I don't know if
Well,
they took
there's a few
wanting.
things they didn't do. Yeah. Um, to be fair.
I don't know. Because they were more concerned, I guess, with make like other stuff like school and IEPs and stuff like that.
What's an
But
IEP?
they didn't necessarily seem to take this want me talking about wanting to die seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And I would tell them like tell some professionals like that they didn't treat me right physically, and I said I want to die, and I don't think they took it seriously. They didn't think I actually wanted to
Mm-hmm.
at some point. But
So.
then once I started getting to ICUs, and
Mm-hmm.
then I would tell them too I'm traumatized, and some of the professionals would be like, well, it doesn't really matter because we give the same medication regardless if it's trauma or other things. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Interesting.
But yeah,
Hmm. So I'm thinking. I'm kind of processing because it's a lot. Yeah, you're saying a lot of stuff, but I guess the issue that I'm kind of having is I'm still not sure if suicide would be the solution here. Because that's I think the victory condition for you. Like this all started when I asked them what the victory conditions were. I think the victory condition would be what situation or what lifestyle, what could happen to where at the end of it all we say yes, that person should kill themselves. Is that the life you live, and is that what we should push people into? And I don't know if that's the life you've lived. I don't know if I would if I could listen. I've listened to what you've said and I would then conclude, yeah, you should kill yourself. Yeah, just no. To me, again, it seems one, we can reach out to far more positive people. Two, we can address the fear of people, the self isolation. We can try to work through that. Um, Three, we can work through the trauma with your parents. We can try to figure out, obviously I'm not a licensed therapist, so I there's only so much I can do there. I'll be honest with you. Um, but I think honestly,
yeah, I think
there's
a
so
lot of
many
it,
things that aren't addressed in your situation. I don't see how we jump to yes, you should kill yourself. It's like
well, I
this.
think a lot of it is kind of like interacts with each other and it's kind of convoluted. But like with the so like I fear people too,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the main reason why I want to unalive. And then when I want to unalive, it makes me want to isolate because of the kind of
Mm-hmm.
guilty feelings as well. And then it's like the trying to like yeah, there are things like I could do like that I would enjoy doing. And like even like yeah, from like jobs, I was like, oh, this is actually okay enough. But it's stuff on the outside, just like fear that gets me wanting to unalive, and it's hard to kind of make it beyond that. But I even feel like even if I was with people I liked and was like doing financially enough okay, I don't know, just I feel like this sense of being very unsafe in the world. That's like And I talked to one therapist about it who was like, "Oh, that makes sense why you want to die and stuff, and you were made to feel very unsafe in the world." And I don't know if she thought she could help me. She was like, "You know what you need? You just need MDMA that will fix all your problems." So I don't know if I believe that.
Are these people really like this? I've never talked to a mental health professional, but the description here is these, as you said, tactless and callous people. That's crazy.
Yeah, she was even the one caring, but like like a lot of them are like even like she was eccentric. She was not like most mental health professionals, but there were no, but yeah, they've just been very like yeah, no, they've been very. A lot of them have been very
Not
callous towards
helpful.
me.
Yeah, not helpful. Yeah. So that's kind of the thing. Honestly, I would honestly think that you should probably address the fear of people and try to figure that out and unpack it.
Well,
Um,
even I even like I was trying to address. Well, like at one point, I was like after at some points I was trying to like address the guilt and kind of more of the self isolation and kind of the how like the nature of my suicide can be kind of very planned and almost secretive. And I know I the reason I talk about it now is like I do kind of I want to spread awareness before I do it, but
mm-hmm.
on some levels it's very much seems like someone who's like of something called over control and they do RODBT. And that could also I feel like address kind of the guilt of talking to people. I wanted to do that for a while, but then it's like it was hard to find like RODBT programs in like person. And the
What is
professionals,
that?
like I
What
said,
does that mean? RO.
like
What?
radically open DBT. It's a certain type of therapy.
Okay,
But
gotcha.
this is what I mean. Like the therapist at the psych ward, they were like, "Well, what do you need?" I was like, "Well, I kind of want to do RDBT," and they were dismissing it. They were saying I should do DBT, which is just more common. So kind of, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like yeah, that would be a lot. That was less what I felt like I wanted. That kind of wouldn't address how I like isolate as much and stuff. I feel like, but it's like at that point I kind of wanted to do that, but now it's like now I even want to do it even less.
Mm-hmm.
But and two, like there's one at like 19. I don't necessarily want to say it, but it was borderline was apparently someone doctor mentioned it briefly when I was a teenager, but my mom brought it up and she was, "Oh, you have this," and I was like, "What? What is this?" And I took a personality disorder test, and I didn't know what borderline was, but it came up low, very low, even lower than the average person in borderline traits,
Mm-hmm.
and it fairly low in narcissism traits, but not super low, but lower than a little bit lower than the average. But then it came up like super high in one of the ones that's like not cluster B. And at first I was like, I saw the name and I was like, this is ridiculous. And I'm only not saying it because I don't want to make people to make like lazy assessments. People might gather it, but whatever. But then I was like, okay, well this is kind of like me, but the framing is off. But then so I was like worried if I got this, it would kind of lead to people thinking certain negative things about me. But
No offense,
so
but what difference does it make if they think anything negative about you if you want to kill yourself?
well, well for one, I feel like if I were to end up in like some situations in psych wards, people would dismiss me more likely if I said why they were mistreating me. And also too, just like I kind of want to leave behind something helpful in the world, and I'm worried if people see it, they're not gonna take what I
Mm-hmm.
say. And seriously, that's not the main goal. Like but it's kind of it's
Mm-hmm.
somewhat. I don't know. I wanted there to be a barrier between lazy assessments so people might know what I'm talking about. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no. But I looked for so I didn't agree with the framing of it, but some of it fit, and because I got almost 100 on this, and I never even heard of this disorder before. It was like some official PD test online, and I was like, okay, but it's weird because so a lot of this has to do with fear of people too.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to look for experts in this because I was like, well, I want to be able to stop have like not be able to attempt and end up in ICU, even though I would think the best case would be to just die. But there's no experts in it from what I
Mm-hmm.
can find.
Mm-hmm.
And, or I do find experts in it, but it's all like on Google Scholar. It's not on like
Mm-hmm.
just
Yeah,
general
not
search.
someone you could reach out to seek like recovery or therapy. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I like don't have options where I reach out on
Mm-hmm.
YouTube. That's actually how I found some testing center
Mm-hmm.
that tests in it, but it's like just to like be able because like I don't necessarily know want to change and not be afraid of people, but I guess how to work around it. I don't know how that would be possible and not
Well,
end up
that
in
would be called
ICU.
coping. Yeah, man.
Yeah, I guess, but like it's hard because I don't like no. But then I reach out to so I reached out to one of the specialists I reached out to. was like, well, people like this don't generally seek treatment. And I was like, I mean, yeah, that's me, so I can see that. But
What difference
also,
would that make? Why would she say that?
but it was like some psychiatrist who was like, oh, but maybe you might be able to like find some experts in a correctional setting. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. How is that meant to be helpful to someone looking for help? Like, I'm not a criminal, so I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah. I was like, she said, well, if you go to jail, maybe. Hmm.
Yeah, no, but it's weird. I don't know. Like, so it's because a lot of in the U.S., the place I was at, actually McLean, is so obsessed with cluster B. It's weird, but I guess part of it is yeah. But there are certain patterns, behavior patterns, and thought patterns I recognize that I have. But
But not really like coping mechanisms to deal with it. Is what I'm hearing a lack
yeah,
of.
I guess I was looking for some type of expert. And the thing about that would be it would be good too because I would see the expert, they'd expect me to act in certain ways. They
Hmm.
wouldn't be like have their ego hurt at it. They wouldn't lash out at me for hopefully things even if we disagreed on the framing of what I did. Like I would think maybe from a more reasonable point of view, they would see it from a more pathologized point of view. But it's like I can't even find that.
Hmm.
But But no, I'm reminded of it sometimes because, like I said, the framing, it just seems like normal things to think to me and reasonable things to think. But sometimes when get people's reactions, especially, or I think even I know them a lot by now because I've had them, like I'm like, oh wow, yeah, that's right. I'm not exactly like everyone else. I'm a lot more like suspicious of people and stuff. But I mean, I don't know. In some ways, I can be more understanding of people as well. Like in certain ways too, and people have even said that to me, but yeah, that's so yeah, it's not like that's like there is to me, but yeah, that's a big part. Like I'm definitely very, very suspicious of people, and
Hmm.
I'm reminded of like a lot of times, like oh yeah, I am more very much more suspicious than other people, and people think it's weird, or people even think I'm like not being genuine. So I'm like, so I think wow, I guess like they have yeah, part of it I think is narrow-mindedness, but part of it I think is like wow, they think my thoughts or beliefs are pretty
Hmm.
outlandish. That's why they can't
So
even believe I have them.
yeah, so let
But
me.
I don't know. I mean,
I'm gonna ask a question, right? Cut and ask a question. So why don't you think that your life in particular is a life worth living?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it is just the world seems like too dangerous of a place,
Mm-hmm.
which I know that's in the minority of an opinion, right? Because I mean,
Well, it
if it
actually
was the
isn't.
most common opinion,
No, it's actually very
everyone would
common,
be.
especially for young women. I will say the minority opinion is I should kill myself because the world's a dangerous place. That's the minority opinion. But I think the
Yeah,
majority
yeah,
opinion actually is that people do think that the world's very dangerous. I mean, I've heard people use that fact to avoid wanting to have children, right? Like it's not out of the ordinary.
yeah, yeah. But I feel like it's still the norm to have kids. I feel like yeah, to some degree it is common. And if you look at like there's something called the Enneagram, and like there's a lot within like trust and loyalty. A lot is like something called the six. I know like not everybody thinks it's the most valid, but the most common type is supposed to be the type I believe I am, which is the most suspicious. And yeah, granted, I'm technically considered on it on the more like unhealthy side. So, but the type of like thought thoughts like is pretty common about like being suspicious of people.
Hmm.
Is supposed to be the most common Enneagram type.
Hmm. So your life, to summarize part of it at least, because we ain't had the full answer, I don't think, is you don't think your life is worth living because we live in a dangerous world and you're suspicious of people.
Yeah, yeah, I would say that's it.
Hmm.
I
Is
feel like
there is there
nothing.
is there anything? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I feel like there's stuff that could do. Like I'm. It's not like I'm all the time unhappy or like all the time, like just focused on that, but it's always there in my mind. So I'm always pretty much fearful. I'm never at peace. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there are times when I'm happy. There's stuff I
So
enjoy.
would
There's
you?
things I'm passionate about.
Yeah. Would you
There's a
say you
life.
deal with anxiety at all? Or is this just you just describing feeling anxious all the time, just with different words?
What's that?
Do you struggle with like anxiety? Do you feel anxious all the
Yeah,
time? Mm-hmm.
yeah. I mean, I struggle. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I guess they have. I get panicky, and they diagnosed me with general anxiety, which is one of the diagnoses that because they give me everyone who sees me gives me another diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
That was definitely one of the ones that was pretty accurate.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And
General
and
anxiety.
so
But
so it's interesting. So when you were having your conversation on Not So Erudite's server, what were the arguments you were putting forth to the people there? Like, what were you saying to them generally?
I was talking about different stuff about how um how they people respond to suicide and like forced in like psychiatry can be harmful and make it worse. I was putting forth bodily autonomy, arguments on bodily autonomy. I
Mm-hmm.
was talking about like something called a bit of the neutral container theory, which is a video I saw. It's like this open lecture from Yale. It's talking about like the rationality and ethics of suicide.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like basically some people have believed like life has like infinite value, so it'll be in like the infinite value container. And then no matter what happens, like life is always better. So very much pronatalist. They're the type of people who believe like animals, even in slaughterhouses, are lucky to be alive, like
Mm-hmm.
and stuff in
And
like
you're
factory
you're you're an
farms.
anti-natalist as well, right? Would that be fair to say?
Huh?
Are you an anti-natalist as well?
Guess maybe more like I don't take a strong stance on that. I do
Okay.
kind of think I don't,
Mm-hmm.
but because I believe in more of like the neutral container theory, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, which is like well, I guess wait, I should go back to the pro container. So they're very pro-natalist. I think they're the type of people who think like you should just have as much kids as possible a lot of the times. And yeah, they believe even animals in factory farms are luckier to be alive. But like life is just a gift; it's inherently a gift. That type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like the neutral container theory that believes light itself is neutral, but it's more about the contents within it. So I think that tends to be the most reasonable position. And then there's ones who are more like life is just pretty much inherently bad, and they're very strong anti-natalists.
Mm-hmm.
And even more like pro, not even like pro-choice, but they probably think probably everyone would be better off if like life was just wiped out of existence. They think life is just so much suffering that it's just not even worth it at all. But
Mm-hmm.
and then there are people on a scale. There are people like, oh, life is pretty valuable, but it'll take a lot to say someone would be better off not being alive. Or yeah, life is pretty bad, but there are some like really exceptionally good things that make life worth living.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I shared those types of yeah. So that a little bit on that I talked about.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But you didn't talk about like your personal life to them at all. Like
I
you didn't
a little
explain
bit. No, I
a little bit. Okay.
yeah. I kind of had a mixture of different stuff I talked about. Um, until yeah.
And what was their like? Could
Erudite.
you summarize their counter arguments?
Some of them agreed with me.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, there's a vastly different. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it was a lot of them had to do with harm to others, and like
Mm-hmm.
some of it had to do with people. Not as much as people not having the capacity, but along those lines, some of them. But most of them was more like the impact on others. Those the
Mm-hmm.
main arguments I got.
But
And
not
like it's
about.
selfish, it's stupid,
Mm-hmm.
you're weak for wanting that.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. People say that a lot. I don't like thinking of people as weak for committing suicide. That seems a little silly to me.
Yeah,
Um.
like I said, that one person kept calling me like said I was selfish, stupid, and was saying people who commit suicide are weak ass bitches.
Yeah.
And she said that like repeatedly.
Yeah. People are interesting with their disdain of the weak, but we'll talk about that some other time, I think.
Yeah. You know, well, I don't know if I should like. Yeah, there's one YouTuber who came in, the moderator, and he was like trying to act like play both sides, which is kind of weird, and acting like I didn't understand her position. I was like, I do. I'm just saying like to stop. I just want this person to not, like I said to you, or I just want this person to not project onto me, and to stop being so vitriolic. Like I feel like I was being cordial, especially like at the beginning, but like it was just hours, like right too of like weak ass bitches. Oh, people who commit suicide or this, and it's just like, and like
Yeah.
it's
What?
strangers,
So
so I'm like whatever. But at the same time, it is
yeah,
someone who's so much vitriol toward me.
it does question what exactly is her. What's her objective? I don't know. It's interesting.
She kept going. She like look. She kept going on. I guess about her, like yeah, like her pain, and she said, "Oh, because I said you don't know me." And she said, "Oh, I know suicide," which like obviously people should be compassionate to people's pains, but I told her like you don't get to take out like your pain on me like this without pushback, because and I said like I didn't do that stuff to you. I was kind of trying to point out that like not that I'm not saying I said saying like
Okay, so
the
pause for
people
a
who
second.
committed
Okay.
suicide did, for it sounds more harsh than I mean it, but like I'm not. I said like I'm not involved in that kind of situation.
But okay, but pause for a second. So was the person you were arguing with implying that someone they knew committed suicide?
Yes, they were.
Okay.
Yeah.
So okay. Okay. So we're probably definitely okay. 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 So how do I say this? I got a lot more understanding of why she acted the way she did to you now. Actually,
Okay, I have some level of
that explains
understanding,
everything.
but like I said, I wasn't. I said I kind of, which I kind of like. What like I for that reason I did try to be cordial, especially at first. But
No,
but then she kind of.
but that person's clearly hurt, my friend.
I know they're hurt, but I told her I said you don't like you don't get you're taking out your pain on me, but I'm not involved. Like you don't know me.
Here's the thing though, right? Let's take a step back from you, Kayla, right? Just for 1 second. Let's pretend that this happened to two other people, okay? Could you not see the effects that suicide has had on this person you're arguing with? Let's call her, I don't know,
Oh,
Samantha.
I already knew that. To like I said, I did try to be cordial. That's why I tried to be cordial to some extent.
It's not about being cordial though, right? It's like I'm trying to find the
But
best way to articulate this, right? Because when you say you're being cordial, it implies that the gravity of the conversation isn't reaching you, right? What this person is trying to communicate, obviously in the most poorest of ways, is that when you commit suicide, what you're leaving behind is trauma and pain for someone that loved you. But
yeah,
you're not touching that heaviness, right? Like to you, you're like, well, I get it, it hurts, but like we're having a different conversation. So that's why I say,
well,
like, for a second, step outside of yourself and see.
I mean, I do
That's
get,
what.
I do.
Go ahead.
No, I get, and I get it on a more personal level. But at the same time, I felt like what she was doing, like, wasn't right, and that's why I was trying to be cordial. But at the same time, I'm gonna push back and tell her like this is unfair. And she did get very triggered by the word projection at one point, where I think a lot of it came from. I don't know why, but I was just trying to kind of be like, hey, like I'm not projecting onto you, you're projecting onto me, this is unfair. And then that's when she started openly mocking me. And at one point it came out, she was like, you're a super bitch. That's what she, I guess,
Yeah,
like word correctly. She's like, you're
but
so
that's the thing though.
unempathetic to me.
But
And
that's the
I
thing.
didn't,
So I realized she wasn't that the interesting thing about people. She was projecting. You're 100% correct, and that's kind of the thing, right? When she wasn't talking to you, she was talking to the person that killed themselves. You realize that,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and I got that, but I was trying to point out that it's unfair, not just, I mean, for me, but also just in general. Like I was trying to point out, this is really unfair behavior.
Yeah, you're right. But what I'm trying to get you to connect to, Kayla, is the gravity of what you're asking to be, I don't know, you're saying legislated, but like to be accepted, that people should
No,
accept. Go
yeah,
ahead.
on some level, yeah, no, I get that. I mean, and I wasn't, and I'm not gonna like. I thought what I was trying to address with her more was kind of that stuff. Like I was just kind of trying to like say, like, yeah, this isn't acceptable, and just to like to let her know that, because I think it can be actually quite harmful the way she's talking
I would say,
to,
yeah.
yeah, you,
Oh
yeah,
yeah, I'll give you that 100%.
and I tried to point out that this type of stuff could actually worsen. I don't think I mentioned it much. Maybe I kind of touched on it, but yeah, and it was interesting because she was talking about how she was a victim of
Yeah.
verbal abuse. And at one point, I wasn't trying to like, I didn't want to really go into that like you were verbally. I mostly just tried to use more neutral language. But I said, I'm just pointing it out because of the hypocrisy. But you've arguably ventured into verbal abuse at this point. Because she was talking about how she was a victim of abuse, and but I don't want to end my life or something because I'm not a weak ass bitch and stuff like that.
Yeah. Um. It'd be an interesting conversation with her, I guess. But I
Yeah.
see. I think it makes a lot more sense now. And the reason why I was kind of asking, kind of like what arguments were they bringing forth, was because I'm not the type of person to discuss this topic as far as like legislation is concerned, or as far as even, how do I say,
Yeah.
like ethics are concerned, right? Like what's the
I
ethics of suicide?
I think like I would probably do it regardless, but I do think like a lot being trapped is the one reason why people do it. So I think forcing them, and I think like when there's force involved, a lot of times things get like harmful, and that can be like physical abuse can happen more often. But I think also like psych wards worsen suicidality for everyone, even non-suicidal people.
I would say,
Like
yeah.
being locked up, having your rights taken away. So I think perhaps if it was like if people had the option, because especially because they feel trapped, less people would do it. I probably still would, but yeah. I mean,
So
also,
you think having the option legally to like go to a facility would cause less suicides, not more?
uh,
Because that's not how it worked with abortion at all.
yeah. I mean, I would based on, like I said, based on how a lot of the ways I think there's reason to believe it could, but and
I
I've
don't think
heard that
so.
argument.
I don't think so. I'll be honest with you.
I
Like I
mean, not
said, I mean,
oh, I mean, it wouldn't do it for everybody, but no, I think people like some people even who don't end up going that far, like thinking they have the option has helped them not to do it. I don't. But for me, obviously,
the
I'm not
thing
that.
is, Kayla, and this is why I don't argue about the autonomy of suicide. You do have the option. You have the ultimate option, right? The government, they're going to send the FBI to have 24-hour surveillance on you, right? They're going to have an EpiPen for every
Well,
ailment that you
but
have to stop you
like I
from
mean,
every
it's like,
poison you could take.
like no, but I mean, to some extent, like no, because like
Like,
I
obviously, no,
really,
but
because I know I don't want to wake up in the ICU again and stuff. But
yeah, I
in
mean,
some, I mean,
if
maybe
you,
like
but you got to
I feel
think
like if
about this. Like for a moment, you got to think about this, right? You could mix bleach and ammonia in your house if you wanted to, and then that could be a complete accident. No one could even, who would even know that you did that because you had suicidal thoughts without a track record. You understand what I'm saying?
yes and no, I feel like it's more. It's
What
not as
I
simple as
so
that.
so so what I'm saying is what you say is not as simple, but what I'm trying to communicate is that ultimately, let's say even if we say suicide is illegal, which it technically is, if it's successful, like you're dead. Like there's no,
Yeah,
right?
that's the allure of
Unless
it.
we
That's
start talking about, spirituality, the human spirit and religion, beyond that, if we're just talking about purely material in this
no,
plane, that's game set
definitely
match.
blur. It's like I
Mm-hmm.
want to do it, but I don't want to miss and end up. And two, I could end up at the second to last. So like the second
Mm-hmm.
time I got
But you see,
di
but this is why.
dialysis, and
Mm-hmm.
they even said at one point like I was worried about permanently going blind when I woke up. My vision was like
Mm-hmm.
really messed up, and yeah, and the time with the dialysis, they said, "Oh, you don't have permanent kidney damages," because I had acute dialysis.
Mm-hmm.
I was like thinking, "Wow, I didn't." So I guess I could have had permanent. So yeah, different
But you could have
stuff.
died. Is it? You could have. Yeah. You could have.
But that
Yeah.
was the goal, so I wasn't worried about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the thing is, the reason why I don't really think too hard about the autonomy and the ethics I was trying to explain is because when done successfully, the government, there's no pressure the government
Well,
can
I
apply
know,
to you. Just,
but
you know.
it's not done successfully, which I haven't done in the past, which has been
Mm-hmm.
kind of which is why I want it to be officially legally recognized
Mm-hmm.
as
Yeah,
okay.
but that's so. This is kind of the
And
issue
even
that.
not even
Go
not
ahead.
for me, even if it's in the future with if I don't know, hopefully I won't be
To
in such
to
a bad state where I can't, but if I do successfully do it, people might hear it and it either become a law or they might handle it still in much better ways, and that's kind of the goal of why I'm sharing the story really.
but that seems
Like
extremely wishful. What you
it
what
is,
you
but
what
I
you
mean
witness,
I
but I
mean
think, but
I
I
don't know if
think,
it will, but
but here's what I actually think this is really great. Which might be weird to say. I think it's great you had that conversation with that woman because that woman is showing you, right, like the direct effects of what you're asking for. And I know
well,
one of the things that because you
I
you were
think I
mentioning
know it
it,
more
right?
from a personal level
Mm-hmm.
than her. Like I don't think I needed her to say that, but I mean
No,
that's why I avoid people. Like so
yeah,
I kind of have an idea of that.
yeah.
But
You have an idea, but you don't have the full emotional weight, and that's what's kind of
I
weird.
I mean I kind of I mean I've maybe not on a personal, but no, I've seen it happen in other people, and I think, and I've known. I don't think I got any new insight into that, really. I mean, but I mean, because I do know that stuff, and like I said, for a reason, why I said I was trying to be cordial to her, but because, like, yeah, on some level, I was like, okay, this person is hurting. I should try to kind of be as most respectful as possible, but on some level, I have to kind of say, like, this is wrong and point that out for myself and just how she's acting in general and how but no, and I like because like I said, like I did largely know understand where
So why does that not deter you?
well, like I said, no, it's the fear and I try to mitigate the effects by avoiding people.
Mm-hmm. But you didn't avoid your mom. You didn't avoid your dad. You didn't avoid your siblings.
No, and I mean to some extent, like I said, it's not gonna be perfect. And also too
Well, yeah,
with
it's
my
not.
parents, I kind of feel like I mean they knew this was like I mean they I don't know, like not always stuff that
You think they're gonna walk it off?
they I mean, they knew no, they knew, like, from a long, like, time and, like, I don't know, like I
So again,
mean, on some
I'm gonna
level, it's
ask I'm
just
gonna
like
ask again, right? You think your parents are just gonna walk off that you finally successfully killed yourself because it's a law? It's legal now.
"Huh, no, what are they gonna do?" I mean, on some and this isn't why. The main reason, like I said, is the fear. It's like, I literally can't handle being in this world.
Mm-hmm.
But on some level, too, it's like, well, what did they expect? I've been talking about it since I was, like, 3, and it's like, they kind of put their head in the sand and, like and I'm not doing it to, like
To spite them, I know. That's, yeah.
yeah, to fight them or punishment, but I mean, like, on some level, like, what do they expect?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here's the thing. Um, the reason why I'm still not convinced is because, yeah, and this is just a summary. Like, I think I'm going to go over some things I already said, but we'll put it all together. One, it seems like you've got issues that should have been addressed that haven't been. Two, I don't see why we would need to make this legal when ultimately the government can't oppress you if you've done it successfully.
Okay, yeah, but
They can't stop you.
there's a lot of harm from it not being done successfully,
Well,
and
there's
I think
many
that's the reason
there's
why.
there's many ways to do it successfully.
I know, but I mean that doesn't change the fact.
I mean, I guess. But also three, I'm still on the mindset that it should be discouraged anyway. I don't even if, let's say, the path to suicide was legal, and we would treat it, say, like, marijuana, cigarettes, alcohol, I would still argue against it. And again, that kind of goes back to the first reason. It would appear to me that there aren't very many stories that and therefore I should kill myself. I don't know very many stories like that. And I don't think you have that story. I'm gonna be honest with you. I do think that a lot of people failed you. I think a lot of people failed you in your life. But the fear of people seems like that should be tackled long before, you fight for the right to suicide. Long before we get there.
Yeah, I mean,
And
this isn't even on a person, but I feel like on a deeper ethical issue, and I feel like, yeah, maybe some of what I share will help people kind of not get
so
to the point where they
let's
fear people, but
let's
even like
say
fear people and like preventing trauma and abuse and just societal issues. I feel like that's kind of the goal too with sharing my story along with that. But I mean, like I said, with the fear of people, I kind of brought up like I try to. Yeah, it's hard. Like, yeah, they don't even recognize it. The mental health professionals I've seen, really, it's weird, and they're kind of what people go to. And I have a lot of problems with the mental health field for this reason that it's kind of the end all be all. But when I look for experts in this specific for people with those specific patterns that really just have a longstanding mistrust of people. I can't like find them, or the ones I find don't respond, or they respond very unhelpfully.
so I'm thinking. Yeah, I don't know, man. People failed you. I'm sorry. So, like, even looking at suicide from an ethical point of view, I think my ethics still challenge me to conclude that suicide is the path forward, because it seems like suicide is the ultimate breaking point of a lack of coping. Not really coping failing, because I haven't heard very many coping strategies from you, number one. And a lot of different ways, it seems like the path to suicide is to end or avoid suffering, but
Yeah,
you could also endure the suffering and overcome the suffering and move forward. There is a more
right.
hopeful path forward. It's challenging, sure, but it exists. Why not that path?
I think, yeah, like what I said. Ultimately, I think it's the most reasonable decision, and people won't agree with it, but I don't know what to say. Like, I believe it's the most reasonable thing and safest
But you don't think
option.
it's more
It's like,
reasonable? So you don't think it's more reasonable to gain the strength to deal with the pain than to just end it?
um, the pain. I mean, yeah, I'm in a lot of pain. It's not
When I
even
say,
about
I don't
pain.
even
Like I
mean
said,
like physical, or like
it's
even.
about fear. So
Mhm.
it's about, I feel like there's legitimate danger, and I
Mhm.
feel like that's that's what I mean. There's
Yeah,
legitimate danger.
in your case specifically, right? But like if we were
Yes.
like again to take a step back and look at it like ethically, it's like if you can overcome the trauma, if you can find those networks and say like for example, you could even, go to church if you so desired and speak to other people who are also in the church that have similar experiences. And even if not a Christian church, you can try, multiple different avenues here. But obviously I'm biased, so but the point is, if you can seek out a way to deal with this stuff, why would you prefer the suicide when there's very many people, myself included, who have had these same thoughts and have overcome them.
Yeah, I don't like it kind of comes down to like this is what I feel like the most reasonable and safest way. And I know that sounds
But the irony, you say it's
backwards.
reasonable, but it's not reason that got you here though.
I mean,
Because
somewhat. I mean,
well,
it's
we'll
along the
follow the
way, like
logic
it's
though, right? Because if we're
what?
talking about reason, let's follow the logic, right? You are afraid of people, right? Now, one way to deal with that
Yeah.
would be to face the fear.
No, I don't think so because I think it's a legitimate fear.
Exactly. No, make no mistake. I'm not saying it isn't a legitimate fear. You face legitimate fears. It kind of
But
precludes
no, I
that.
don't.
It kind of necessitates
Even
it's a
being around
legitimate fear.
people, I don't like on. I don't think you're gonna like. There's different. No, I told you like where there's like the guilt and the fear. But no, I think it's ultimately it's even if it's not that person, it's like there's gonna be something that I'm in potential danger, and it's just yeah. That's at the end of the day. I think I'll always feel safer if I'm just not in this
Hmm.
world.
You could always feel safer if you had a pistol, if you had martial arts
Okay, yeah,
training. I
but
mean,
I mean, I think it's like what I feel like is kind of um people don't get or they kind of have a lot of trouble contending with is like that's what I mean. It's like it's just I feel like it's the most reasonable way, and it's like not like I
well, it's the most
want
permanent way, I
I
guess,
just
most
want it.
assured way.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, even when I was younger, I realized death was permanent, and then I kind of thought about it. It just seemed a bit comforting,
Hmm.
but
But the thing is, so here's the issue though, right? It's like, let's say it is the most, how do you say, the most complete way to avoid the dangers of the world. I'll just kill myself. Ironically
yeah,
enough, that's how the antagonist Ultron thinks, right? I don't know how familiar you are with reading like comic books or stories or themes thematically, but Ultron the robot has recognized that all of humanity has to die because as long as two humans live, there'll be conflict. Its entire purpose is to protect humanity, but humans, ironically, are its biggest threat. To protect humanity, it has to wipe them all out. That's the robotic logical reasoning that Ultron comes to. Now, of course, it's foolish, or at least I say, of course, it's foolish. It's because not every single human is going to harm each other. Not every human is a threat to each other. It's this gigantic, robotic, lack of nuance thought process that doesn't really map onto reality very well. And that's
yeah.
what this is here. And if we're not just Ultron the robot like thematically,
No,
let's
and I
just look
have
at
that. I have
like
that, like
driving a car, right? Like if you say
who
if I
wants to be
never
instead, but the
well
risk is always going to be too high, and I'm just always going to rather
but
like
but see but let me finish, right? Cuz I'm going to address that, right? If we go to I'm never going to drive a car because then I'll never get into a car accident. That is entirely true. You've completely avoided the risk, no harm, no foul. Only problem is you also forfeit any benefit to that. And that is getting to a location faster. That's carrying more objects to the location faster, right? That's protection from the elements when you go outside, right? Your car has heating and air conditioner in case it's hot outside, right? You forego everything. You don't. It's so yeah. All the danger's gone, but all the benefits are gone too. And so the problem that I have here, right, is like, is do you even have a benefit or an understanding of the benefit of what living life is before we just get to, well, I'm too afraid, so I'm gonna kill myself.
yeah, yeah, no, I like I said, no, I'm passionate about things. There are things that make me happy. There are things I know I'd be happy doing, but no. I accept that. I accept there'll be losses, and I've cut them. I'd rather that safety and security, like,
Mm-hmm.
to be honest.
I see. And to what extent have you ever confronted this fear, actually?
Like I'm like, I mean, I don't like I don't know. It's like there's a difference. I feel like the way kind of that might be something someone would do is if it was like more like kind of like a phobia type of thing where people are like, "Oh, I know I shouldn't be afraid of this, but I am." But no, I think it's reasonable. So it's like I just don't have the desire to, I guess, as
Mm-hmm.
you would say, confront it.
Mm-hmm. I see. Interesting. So, hmm. I guess then you probably would have to go about dismantling the idea that it's reasonable, because it's not reasonable, or maybe it's only reasonable loosely as, right, like here's a valid argument, but I'm not sure if I can say it's a sound argument. You know the difference, right?
Um. Okay. So a, a sound argument
Well, I can
makes
tell
sense,
you. Well, a valid argument is an argument that
and a
makes
valid
sense.
argument has like
If if
kind of
all so here's the thing. A valid argument is an argument that is acceptable if all the premises are true. A sound argument is all the premises are true, right? So a valid
mhm,
argument is okay. If I can fly, right, and I'm a human, then other humans should be able to fly. That should be a valid
yeah,
argument, right? The only problem is not sound because I can't fly. You see the
yeah,
difference? So you might have a valid argument insofar as if I kill myself, then I avoid the permanent danger of the world, right? But is that even sound? Because then you're really facing the ultimate danger, and that's death. The whole reason why you're afraid of other things to begin with is because of the reality of pain and therefore death. That's the whole thing. But what you're
yeah,
saying is I'm going to circumvent the whole thing altogether. Just we'll
yeah.
screw it. It's like,
I mean, I
well then what's the point of being
that's why I said
afraid?
like that's why part of why I said I know suicide seems like counterintuitive thing to think it's kind of evolutionary, but yeah, I mean, I think sometimes things, yeah, it's like I guess sometimes things don't make sense like that. Like your immune
Well, it
system
makes
can make you
sense.
really sick in
Well,
ways that
yeah.
kind of.
So yeah, you're describing an autoimmune disease. I mean,
I
that's
know, but I'm
because.
saying it like
Oh well,
not
go
perfect
ahead.
analogy, but it's like different things can seem counterintuitive, really. But even when it's working well, right? You get a fever and it seems bad, but it like I feel like yeah, maybe that you get somehow pain to avoid ultimately to avoid death, but at the same time we evolved to if we feel so much pain to that I guess is more than it's worth or so much kind of distress
Well,
that we end up ending it that could have
but
been.
here's the thing though, right? Is that typically the conclusion people come to? Because you acknowledge that it's not actually. It's not.
No, I
If
no, I mean
only
I
a small amount of people come to this conclusion, why would we believe that this is evolutionary?
like why I believe that's part of evolutionary, right? I mean that only some people would do this, right? It's like if everyone did it, we'd die off. But I think, but yes,
But a
all I
large
think.
amount of people have to do it in order for it to become an instinct or something that propagates throughout the species.
Well, no, I mean different things. I think, yeah, to some. I think to some level, and to some level, it is common in all of us to think that, and some of us, I think, are at the more extreme end. I think it's more common to think about it to some degree, at some extent, wanting to be dead or wanting to commit suicide. And I'm on the more extreme end. I thought about it much younger than other people. I've thought about it much more intense and much kind of like longer bouts. It's like constant now, but and like yeah, and different people, and even like I've been to intensive care. Like I didn't. I've taken really slow acting poison, and I've not called anybody or have any desire to call anyone. That's on the rare side of things. I've been in intensive care at a fairly young age too, 19. That's on the more rare side of things. But
No, I get you. What are some other things you're passionate about?
no, like a lot of stuff. Like it's like yeah, like so now I'm putting it forth on my YouTube stuff about like human human rights and stuff, and like also put up on stuff on confidence because like that I'm interested in prison rights. I'm interested in psychiatric rights because I feel like it's misunderstood in many ways. And did I say veganism? Yeah, and like
So,
yeah, and I want the world to be a better place, but too then like and I'm trying to put ideas out there for it to be, but I like don't know if it will make much of a difference. But I figure why not try to, and I feel like I could because I think I have some ideas that could be pretty helpful. Like I don't think, yeah, like my ideas are like the greatest gift to Earth. I don't think I can necessarily change the Earth, and I think I'm pretty good at communicating. So I think it could have somewhat of a positive impact if I put videos out. And that was like what I thought about with the vegan cartoons. Like I made some videos I thought like could entertain some people and get the message of veganism out there in kind of more of an indirect way. So I think maybe if people watched it and were entertained by it, they could just get them thinking about veganism, and then the other arguments for veganism might kind of more sway them more. Because mine would have had to have been, I think, more in conjuncture with other vegan like activism and stuff, and so mine was just kind of more an add-on. But no, yeah, I'm passionate about many things. I'm in like somewhat, yeah, politics. I think particularly, I think we should get ranked choice voting. That's one of the things I believe.
okay.
But I'm like at the same time, I think some of this stuff, if I advocate for it, then I won't necessarily be around when it's there, but I still think it's a worthwhile endeavor. And same thing with prison rights. I think if I get people more on board with prison rights, and I'm not like affected by some of this stuff I'm affected by. Like I'm affected by psych rights, and I think if I get psych rights on board too, that could be, even if I don't benefit from it, some others might benefit from it down the road. And also like I think kids should have more rights because especially because I think I was mistreated a lot as a kid and different stuff, and like how schools aren't the most helpful for like the average person. And that's also what I talk about. Like the average person, I think, is oftentimes struggling. And I think we have a tendency to label stuff that's inconvenient as abnormal instead of what's legitimately really outside the norm. And that can create to both like people being unsympathetic with others' issues because I feel like people are just struggling on a very large scale. I feel like society doesn't
No,
want to admit.
those are really good causes. So it's interesting, right? Because then it leads me to which I guess will probably be the last question for the night since we've been here for about like an hour and 30 minutes. If it's the case that all of these really important issues are out there and you've got all these ideas, why is it better for the world to not have you when you're the one that have all of these good ideas to help people?
I mean, part of, yeah, I think, well, that's why I'm kind of putting stuff out there, and I don't know how it will catch on or not, but I'm kind of just putting out stuff as much as I can. But like, yeah, so ultimately I do, and I like do like care about what I see as my safety. I know you disagree, but yeah, that's what I care. But at the same time, it's like
No, I
I
don't
fear the
disagree.
world.
No, I don't disagree about you wanting to feel safe. I disagree that
Yeah.
the solution is suicide.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, that's what I meant. But I
Yeah.
mean, so it's like I fear the world in many ways, but I have goodwill towards the world. So while I'm here, I'm like I want to put out positive things,
Mhm.
but at the same time, I don't want to stick around long. But I do want to put out positive things and ideas and stuff, and
Mhm.
share causes I believe in, and use my voice to articulate them as best of my ability. And I don't know if I'll necessarily will work, but it's like I'll try.
Mhm.
Like and like as long as I'm here, I'll just keep trying with that.
No, I get you. No, I get you. But alright, my friend. I think it's probably best to leave it here for now. Like I
All right,
said,
yeah,
it's
thanks
been
a
about an
lot.
hour and 30 minutes, so yeah, there's probably you probably got some stuff to get done. So I'm gonna end the recording here. So I just want to say to anyone that's made it this far to the end of the video, thank you. Thank you very much. I know it was long conversation, but I do absolutely hope that it was interesting enough, thought provoking enough to keep your attention up to this point. Final thoughts, I guess you could say, is or it might be better to have an explanation because I think I've said all my thoughts in the conversation. But ultimately, one of the major reasons why I make YouTube videos, and the reason why I am a social commentator, is ultimately my objective is to help people not feel the way that I felt growing up. And I had suicidal thoughts growing up when I was when I was like 14, 15, 16, teenager. Um, and it's kind of those thoughts even helped change the trajectory of my channel in general. I obviously don't make very many videos on the topic, but ultimately, the idea of helping young men and any young lady come by just feel a little less crazy, to feel a little less out of place in the world, has always been one of my primary objectives, right? And so that's why the conversation is extremely important to me. I don't really know to what extent I have, helped people. Um, it does appear to me that to some extent, very many people have gotten a lot out of the videos I've created. And I don't have any intentions on not making any more, to be fair. So I'm not going away, at least as far as I know. At least as far as with intent. There's still a lot of stuff to be socially commented on and lots of things to be discussed. So yeah, that's why I make these videos, and that's why I am glad to have had this conversation. I don't know if this conversation will have much of an effect on my friend Kayla here, but I do hope it does. I do hope she does come to think. I don't know, but and I also hope that to anyone else watching it, again, it makes you think too. My position is extremely biased. I don't want you to commit suicide. I would much prefer that you have the strength to face the fears, to face the issues you're having, and to ask for help when you need it. There's absolutely no issue. There's absolutely nothing wrong with asking for help. I don't. So, hopefully, you guys got something out today's video, and if you did, I don't know, man, go and click the like button. And shoot, go and click the subscribe button. Comment in the comment box below, and as always, you guys have yourselves a great day. I will see you cool cats soon. Adios.